I did this presentation over at the Willows, and
You're good. I can
Barb
edit
and
this
Chris
out.
were there, and Barb had a question about what is raw honey. So does anybody know what raw honey is? Well, let me ask you this, how many people in here use honey? A lot of you, okay.
Yeah.
So when you go to the store to buy your honey, you have to be real careful, because there are no labeling laws for the labels on honey. So, and the other thing is they can cut honey or thin it out with corn syrup up to 15%
Wow.
and not even put it on the label.
That better change.
Pardon?
That needs to change.
Well, we're trying, but you know, trying to change something. So raw honey, the definition of it is not filtered or pasteurized. Anybody know about the pasteurization process when it kicks in? It kicks in about 120 degrees. Now, bigger companies will heat the honey so it flows faster. So it's like the velocity of your oil in your car. Your oil is thick, but as it warms up, it gets thinner. Same thing with honey. As it warms up, it flows easier. And so a lot of companies heat it, and they do filter it because it gets out all the particles. That's why a lot of your honey on the shelves won't crystallize, because all those particles are removed. So it's also, it's heated and filtered. So that definitely takes it out of the category of a raw honey. So you have to be real careful with the stuff you buy in the store. If you're buying honey for the medicinal properties in honey, you want to buy a local honey from a beekeeper. Now, I've had a lady come up to me, well, I've had a couple people come up to me and say, this isn't raw honey. And I'm saying, why are you saying that? Some people will come up and want honey that is full of stuff, not even screened. I screen my honey to get out wax particles and bee parts and stuff like that. Some people want honey that is not even screened. They want just honey squished out of a hive. And that's what they considered raw honey, that it didn't have any of that done to it. And so there are different stages of even raw honey that some people look at it differently. So there's nothing to say when you go to a farmer's market and stuff and you see a big cloudy jar of honey there and it has raw honey on it, that could be very raw honey, you know, to the extreme. I didn't do that because I didn't want, you know, bee parts and wax and stuff in the honey. So I screened mine. I never filtered it. I screened it. And then I did warm it to have it flow a little bit, because if not, sometimes it can be as thick as tar. So I did warm it. I kept it right at about 90 degrees. And at 90 degrees, I can flow it enough to bottle it and get it in containers and actually get the air bubbles out of it. Because when I extract, I used a centrifugal extractor, which would spin the honey out of the honey frames, and that would cause air bubbles in it. So by warming it to 90, I would clarify it a little bit, get those air bubbles out of it and help it flow a little bit. So when I did that, my honey normally looked pretty good. Now, the other thing, and it's gonna be hard to get this clarified when you're talking to the beekeeper, if you're buying it from a local beekeeper, is how do they control their bees, where they're going, and which chemicals do they use in their hive to control pests? Because some beekeepers use a lot of chemicals in their hives in controlling their pests. I used a chemical-free pest management process, so I used no chemicals at all in my hives. And when I was looking for my locations, I wanted all organic, close as possible locations for my beehive to try to keep my honey as pure as possible. Of course, you can't control where the bees are going to fly. And so a lot of times when you see a honey that says clover honey and stuff like that, you got to be real careful about that, because a lot of times they're jacking up the price for a specialty honey when it's really hard to control where their bees are going to fly. So you got to be careful along that part also. And even though I had my own honey, when I would travel, I would look at buying honey at a lot of different locations because honey has different flavors. If you're not familiar with honey, it can go from almost a crystal clear white to a black and all different colors in between. Most of the time in the store, all you see is that like brownish amber kind of honey. But honey has all different colors depending on where the bees harvest the nectar at. So you could get everything. In fact, at one point here, well, I always want to say last year, but it's been about 4 or 5 years ago. My bees got into some buckwheat. Buckwheat honey is as black as Pam's coffee cup there. So when you see that, you're like, wow, what is that? And I said, it's buckwheat honey. Buckwheat honey had a real strong flavor to it. But as soon as a couple people found out I had buckwheat honey, I was sold out in 2 weeks. One person came and bought it and says, whatever you have next week, bring it all, I'll buy it all. Because they love the buckwheat honey. I didn't charge any extra for it because I couldn't say it was 100% buckwheat, but it was black enough when I harvested. I try to keep those frames separate and harvested them separately to try to keep it as pure buckwheat as possible. But you will see that also. Now, another thing I ran into is I went down to, we were down in Amish country. And I'll challenge you if you want to do this. Down in, there's that hardware store. I can never remember the name. Layman's. I went in there and looked at their honey. And I'm thinking, oh, this ought to be pretty good honey here. You know, Amish people raising bees and stuff. They did a end around on me, because that's a football term, not a beekeeping term. I was looking at the bottle and it said bottled in Holmes County. So it wasn't from Holmes County, it was just bottled in Holmes County. So I don't know where that honey come from. So that's what you have to be careful also sometimes when you're buying. Just go into the store sometimes and look at the honey in the store. I've seen it from Venezuela, from Chile, you know, even in our local stores here. So when you're looking at the honey there, you know, you have to be careful. It didn't say local honey, so I'll grant them that, but you would assume there at Layman's in Amish country, it's a local honey, and I can't say it was because it just said it was bottled there. So that's a lot of the interesting aspects just dealing with honey.
So is it better to buy raw honey or just the regular honey?
I would recommend raw honey if you can get it, because honey in of itself has a lot of enzymes and even like mine, because I didn't filter, it has the pollens from the local area. So it will help you with your allergies,
Oh,
because it's like getting a boost, you know, like when you get a flu shot, you get a little flu. Same thing when you're buying a local raw honey, you're getting some of the local pollens in the honey. So it's gonna help you to build up a little resistance to the allergies in the area. So, I had a fellow one time wanted to buy honey, my honey for his daughter, who was down in Columbus going to school, and I said, well, it's not gonna help her with her allergies down there, because they have a whole different flora, flowers and plants down there than we do up here in Northwest Ohio. So I said, she needs to go down to a farmer's market down there and find a local raw honey. And I told him, don't buy it in the store, have her find a farmer's market and buy it from a local beekeeper down there. So if you're looking for honey for the benefits of it, you want to buy a raw honey. If you're looking for honey, just a sweetener, go to Kroger and buy it there. Because no telling what you have. You're gonna have maybe corn syrup in it and everything else. So, yeah, Barb.
What if, it doesn't say raw honey on the label, but if you were to ask, they would say, oh yeah, is this raw honey? They might say yes. Could you believe that if it wasn't on the label?
I would believe it from a local beekeeper. That's the only person I would believe. Because, like for me, my reputation was on my honey. And so, I backed my honey, you know, and I said, if you don't like it, bring it back. And I had one guy brought his honey back. He said it was too sweet. And I said, but I said, I can't take it back, but I gave him his money back, and I said, give it to a friend, you know? So that's, you have to be careful about, yes.
So where is the best place to buy decent raw honey? You mentioned farmers markets.
The farmer's market,
That's
it's
about-
starting in, I think, 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
Farmers market.
Down here, it'll be at the same place it's always been, across from Huntington Bank.
Clough in South Main,
Say again.
Clough in South Main,
Okay.
Yeah,
the
it's,
parking lot, right there.
yeah, across
And
from Huntington
Belleville's,
Bank.
Belleville's Meat Market, they sell a local honey.
Ah,
And there are if you go outside of Signet, I know there's a couple places, you know, if you're, like they sell eggs, there's places that'll sell honey on
Yeah.
sideline streets.
You can get it there, you can get it, Midwood sells it, Beakers and Pemberville sells, honey from Custer. I know the people there that sell it. Grounds for Pot,
they sell.
they sell it in there. That's, I think, Householders Honey, or it might be under Schooner's label. You got, out in Grand Rapids,
Mhm.
you have the honey store out there. It's open just short hours. They sell honey there.
What diameter would you say, you know, the radius of how far away you want that honey? Say, I live in Bowling Green, how far out, 30 miles, 20 miles?
Yeah, most of our fauna is about the same around here because we're a big swamp area, like, so. I would say anything, you know, 30, 40 miles, you should be pretty good around here. Yes, sir.
What's, do you have any advice for people when they see cars sitting on the side of the road selling their own honey? Is there any way of knowing if that's legitimate or?
Is there somebody sitting there with it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I've seen
you
that
can
many
ask
times.
them some questions, you know, like where's their hives located? How many hives do they have, you know, and things like that. How do you process your honey?
Okay.
You know, just, if they crush it or use an extractor or stuff like that, so, yeah.
Metal. A metal spoon, I've heard you shouldn't use a metal spoon.
No, everything, I use was stainless. I mean, it's metal, but, everything was stainless, which you use in a certified kitchen for processing your honey.
That's okay to use?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Stainless isn't, very porous, so, you know, you're not gonna get an exchange of, a lot of chemicals or anything, so it's pretty good there.
What's your best recommendation for long-term storage? Temperature as well as light, everything.
That's a good question. Because, well, let me ask you this. This always throws, can honey go bad?
No.
Yes, it can. I like throwing out there because everybody's, oh, I hear everywhere it says honey never lasts forever.
Yeah.
It does if it's processed correctly. But honey can go bad. Honey will crystallize.
Right.
If you, so normally I sold all my honey in wide mouth jars. So my quarts were wide mouth, my pints were wide mouth, of course, half pints, you only get the regular lid. So you can scoop it out. If it crystallizes, it's not bad. It just has crystallized, it's going to a sugar state. Because honey basically is a form of sugar. But if you process it and the water content, moisture content in your honey is too high, it can ferment on you. So when we process our honey, we have a tool called a refractometer, which checks the moisture content of honey. Moisture in your honey should be below 17% if possible, 14 to 17%. That way it won't ferment on you. What happens when honey ferments?
You get drunk?
You do. What's it called?
I don't know.
Mead. Has anybody ever heard of mead?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's made from fermented honey. So honey will go bad on you, it will ferment on you. I had a bucket that fermented on me and blew the top off the bucket, so that was not a pretty sight. So it can go bad, yes.
I thought they found some in the pyramids that was as good as they had been put in there.
Now, okay, were you listening? What did I say? If it's processed correctly,
That's a long time ago. How
the honey
did they
will
know how
never
to
go
do
bad.
that?
It was probably crystallized. It had a crystal, it wasn't in its liquid form, but you could still eat it. Because when it crystallizes, it will harden up and then it won't let the moisture in it and still be good.
How can you tell when it's gone bad? If
Oh, you
actually
can smell it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, you can smell it.
It'll smell like alcohol.
Yeah, yeasty kind of smell, yeah. Yeah.
You can reliquify it, crystallize if you just set the container in warm water and let it warm up a little.
You gotta use like a double boiler like you're doing chocolate.
Well, it doesn't even have to be terribly hot, just a can of
Yeah.
warm water and set it.
So to store your honey, I stored mine in our utility room. In our utility room, we had our boiler, had our dryer, and had our hot water heater. So if the house was 70 degrees, that utility room was about 80, 85. And it really slowed down the crystallization process. Don't store your honey in the refrigerator. That will expedite the crystallization process. So you want to keep it a little warm. A lot of people will, if you have a stove that has an oven vent, put it on your stove right there. If it's a glass container, don't do plastic. And don't put the plastic in the microwave to decrystallize it, because you'll end up with a glob, you know. You might have a gummy bear then, you might be able to chew it, I don't know, never tried it. So you don't want to do that, so, yes.
I had a bottle and I always store it above the stove because I got it covered with a vent, you know. And it crystallized real fast up there. And I figured it's because it was too hot.
No, it probably was the opposite, that, depending on the sugar content,
Okay.
sometimes the honey will crystallize faster.
I find,
Some people feed their bees sugar water to help with. So sometimes it will have a higher sugar content and that will crystallize. The way honey crystallizes is based on the particles in the honey. So and then if there's a lot of particles in it, it will crystallize quicker also. So, depending on how they screened it and stuff like that, it might have caused it to.
What about the medicinal properties of Manuka honey from New Zealand, Australia, that has +10, +20, +50, whatever? What is your thought on that?
They have, that's a very good, there are some honeys out there that have different effects on a bunch of different stuff, one because of where they, the bees gather the nectar, it does have some higher medicinal properties as other honeys. And so I would say, yes, you're gonna pay a premium for it. But again, it's a holistic type of treatment. So it's gonna take a lot longer to have an effect on you, and you have to be very consistent with it. But honey does have a lot of medicinal purposes. It's a great antiseptic also, because it's has a very low bacteria content in it. In fact, some hospitals now are using a form of a honey patch bag or bandage to treat wounds and stuff. And so they're finding out there are more and more properties to honey for medicinal purposes. The problem is you can get, I can have a hive here and process honey from that hive, and next year the honey can be completely different because the bees are going to go and gather nectar for what they need to help in their diet. And so they might gather nectar from a complete different group of flowers and plants than they did the year before. And so honey, it's like wine. If I know, I said earlier, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. So now I'm going to use a wine analogy. If you're familiar with wine, the same grapes do not produce the same wine every year because of different weather, water, things like that. Same thing with honey. The honey isn't the same from year to year from the same hive. So control the quality of your honey based on those factors. And so it's different from year to year. Yeah.
As a beekeeper, do you mix honey from different hives to blunt that difference?
Yeah.
Hive by hive?
Yeah, at the peak of my business, I had up to 65 hives. Of course, I would go out and harvest honey from different apiaries. I had 8 different locations, so I would get different honeys from all over and blend it. If I got anything particular like the buckwheat at one time, I would try to separate that and keep it different. Like in the fall, which flower am I thinking about? What blooms in the fall? Along the road, you'll see it.
Chickweed?
No, I'll give you another one. Goldenrod. Goldenrod. Goldenrod will bloom in the fall. If you get into bees get into a big patch of goldenrod. Anybody boys in here? It smells like their tennis shoes after a year of wearing them. So you'll be spitting out that honey and you're like, man, there's some dirty tennis shoes in here somewhere. And that's what goldenrod will smell like. But it's delicious honey. It's like popcorn. It doesn't taste the same as it smells. And same thing with goldenrod. It's a beautiful honey flavor, but the smell of it will just drive you crazy. So yeah, I mixed a lot, just because I had a 60 frame extractor at one time, so I'd load up 60 frames and spin it out. Of course, I couldn't get, now I also have a small one, like I did the buckwheat, I have a 9-frame extractor that I use now. I sold all that when I closed my business down, but I kept my small one, the little 9-frame. So that's what I use now to spin out honey, and so it's, interesting, yes.
Do you have any trouble with dieback and, or with the animals that try to get into your hives?
Oh, yeah. You'll run into everything. I had some hives over in Waterville. A good friend of mine lived right across the street from them. And I had a skunk that was, getting the hives, and what a skunk will do, and the way you tell you have a skunk, he will make a hollow right out by your hives. Cause the bees can kill a skunk if they can sting it on its belly. And so, I would put my hives up a little bit, so he'd have to get up on his hind leg, and he'll scratch the hive, and when the bees come out, he'll grab the bees and eat them. And so, I told my friend about it, and I said, Rich, can you set a trap over there? I said, it's a skunk. He goes, yeah, he said, I don't mind. And he's my age, and he's been trapping since he was 8 years old. And he says that is the biggest skunk he has ever trapped. And I said, of course it is, it's fat on my bees. So, yeah, I had, skunks will get in there, raccoons will get in there, ants, spiders,
Mites?
mice.
Mites.
Mites. Yeah, there's, the biggest trouble with bees right now is a thing called a varroa mite. And it's like basically like a tick on a bee. And so to try to get rid of the varroa mites on your bees is very difficult. And it's not, if you're gonna get varroa mites, it's when you get varroa mites. So a lot of that you can do through, hive management, using a green drone frame. The mites like to lay eggs in the bigger drone comb, because the drones take longer to hatch, and it gives the mites longer time to hatch also in the drone frame. So what you do is you put a frame in there, and it has a pattern of bigger comb on it, so when the bees pull out the comb, it's a bigger,
Space.
yeah, whatever, I can't, comb. And so the queen, when she lays, since it's bigger, knows to lay an unfertilized egg in there, which is a male egg. And then the mites will go in there, and so you wait till it's kind of capped over, and then you bring it out and you throw it in the freezer, and you kill everything in it. And that helps you control your varroa mites, or you use splits and things like that. I went in the winter with 3 hives. I came out with just 1. So I'm actually mentoring a guy, and we packaged, I bought another package of bees Wednesday, and we put it in. And then, on probably middle May, I'm gonna split the hive that overwintered. Cause I like the genetics, since it made it through the winter. I wanna replicate those genetics. So I wanna split that hive, and make another hive out of it, and hopefully, there'll be a stronger genetic line to hopefully overwinter again. So, and that will help control, cause I'll move the queen, and that will break the brooding cycle, and so hopefully that will help control the varroa mite. Yeah.
If we don't want to go into the level of beekeeping and the homes for them like that, is there another way to protect them in our yards?
Don't use chemicals.
Okay, and the flowers, but I mean, do they need shelter of some sort?
No,
No?
you can do it. Young lady over here asked about, she was gonna get a box.
Right.
You'll see, now you gotta remember, a lot of times you'll see stuff advertised for bees. Those bee boxes, they look like a little birdhouse. Those are for like your carpenter bees and your bumblebees and, I think, I have a slide here, I think there's like 500 different bees in Ohio. So the only place honeybees will live is in a hive. So you have to actually either have a hive, or if bees move into a hole in your house. You don't want that, because it's kind of crazy to try to get bees out of
I've
your
seen
house.
those.
Yeah, I've removed a lot in the years, and I don't do it anymore because it's a pain.
How expensive are bees, and are there some African ones that are dangerous?
Yeah, Africanized bees. Yeah, they flew over the wall from South America. I'm glad some of you got that joke. Africanized bees are very aggressive. They were actually brought down South America to study. They do produce a nice honey, they're honey producers, but they are very aggressive. I wouldn't say dangerous, they're very aggressive. You can get regular aggressive bees also. You just have to be careful. And a lot of times, if you get aggressive bees like that, as beekeepers, what we do is we just requeen. We'll find a queen, squish her, and put a new queen in, because she's laying aggressive bees, and we don't want that to have to work the bees. So it's just part of managing your bees. I mean, it's not fun to go out to the hive and get stung 15, 20 times. I really only weigh about 135, but I've been stung so many times I swelled up. So hopefully this year I won't be stung as much, and I'll be smaller next year. So
So do you make any honey at all? I
Yeah.
mean, you're completely retired or what?
yeah, I've retired. This is my third time retired. I am still running bees. I still honey for, friends and family,
Yeah.
but I don't sell it anywhere. So,
Okay.
didn't bring any samples.
and I haven't
Yeah.
processed any this year.
Like you said, you can always bring samples in.
Yeah. Depending on how the bees do, I might have some, I'll let you all know. You see me every Friday down at the veterans group, so I'll let you know.
How much do they cost if you buy, if you're gonna
To
start a hive?
do bees from scratch, it's gonna run you about $650. That's to buy the hive, that's to buy your equipment, that's to buy bees. Bees equipment, yeah. So it's gonna run you about $650 to buy all that stuff.
Oh, I thought bees were far more expensive than that.
No, the package I paid for, on Wednesday was $135. And that's a 3-pound package. That's a box of bees with a queen. 3 pounds equates to about 10,000 bees.
Wow.
And then, I put that in the hive. A hive, when it's up to, full strength, can have anywhere, up to 60,000 bees in about one hive. So, that's why I say you don't want an aggressive hive if you go out there and you're messing with bees. You don't want 60,000 bees coming after you,
How
Yes,
big of an area do you usually need for like a one bee home or whatever?
and that's the great thing about it. I mean,
It doesn't matter?
no,
can
you don't
go
need
small.
that much, because it's not like a dog where they're gonna run around your yard. They're gonna
Right.
fly off and gather the honey. You just need enough place for the hive.
Okay,
There's a lot of urban beekeeping now, rooftops and patios and things like that, where people put a hive on their patio, and stuff like that. You don't really need a lot of room, because the bees are gonna fly off and gather the nectar and come back to you. So you can very easily just have a small space to run bees. Yes, sir.
The recent rainstorm that was so bad, when you have a storm like that, does that do damage to the hives?
Bees can't breathe underwater, so.
No, I understand.
How do you mean damage to the hive?
Just the rain itself, not getting up and flooding the hive, but are they pretty waterproof and?
Yeah, when I tell people, come to me and say, hey, I want to get into beekeeping, I normally tell you, you have to evaluate your yard. Do you have a low spot? Of course, you don't want to put bees in a low spot. I had a guy that I was mentoring a little bit out in Pemberville, and he lived along the river. And of course, the river that runs through Pemberville floods every spring. And so I said, you know, you're gonna have to be careful when you want your hives above the floodplain. And so that's something you need to evaluate as a beekeeper. You don't want to do that. The bees hive itself is a box, you know, it's a square box straight up. I have a picture, and then you put a lid on it. The lid has a tin covering on the top of it to, you know, repel water and stuff. And the bees will fill in the cracks. They make a compound called propolis that is a caulking that is very sticky and very
Waterproof?
yeah, waterproof. I mean, it's everything proof. It will fill in the gaps. You know, they use propolis to fill in all the gaps and make it, you know, pretty airtight. Well, not too much airtight because you still got to open it and stuff. You want some ventilation because moisture is also a detriment to the bees. You don't want a lot of moisture in your hive because that will cause problems just the same as anything else. You don't want moisture in your house either, you know, it's the same thing. So again, that's part of the beekeeping, making sure you have that good ventilation. Because in the wintertime, if you get a lot of moisture, because the bees are still breathing in the wintertime. And just like us, when we breathe, we get off moisture. They give off moisture, and that moisture can condensate and cause water. And of course, water dripping on a bee in cold weather is gonna kill them. So you gotta make sure you got some good ventilation in your hive to get that moisture out and keep your hive as dry as possible in the winter, but not too cold, because you don't wanna freeze your bees.
So
So-
do they hibernate?
No, bees don't hibernate. Bees do a thing what they call cluster. And what they do is they make a ball. And what they'll do is as they get cold, they'll work their way back in, and it's constantly rotating bees. And what they do is they vibrate their wing muscles to generate heat. And so in the center of that ball can be almost 90 degrees. In fact, if there's some videos, if you go like on YouTube, where a bunch of bees will gather around an invader and actually start generating so much heat, they'll kill that invader by overheating it and stuff like that. So that's how they keep warm all winter long. And then you also have to make sure you leave enough food in there. So the bee, because they'll be eating all winter. So that's another thing, you know, you gotta try to do to help overwinter the bees. They gotta be able to eat and stay warm and dry. So that's another thing you gotta manage as a beekeeper, so.
What kind of food do bees eat?
Honey?
Water for the bees and then putting out sugar in it. Is that helpful or not a good idea?
What did I say earlier? Some people will feed bees sugar water,
Right,
and that will get in their honey, and then you get a lot more sugar
so
water
it's
honey.
not good for the honeybees.
No,
that are-
water is good. How many bees might be in a hive?
60,000.
60,000. They like to drink also. A hive at full strength like that can go through a quart of water in a day.
Wow,
And so the other thing when you're selecting for a hive is, do I have some good water, a water source for it? Of course, I tell people the ditches around Wood County aren't necessarily a good water source.
Oh, yeah.
Because you gotta think, would you drink out of that ditch? Well, do you want your bees drinking out of that ditch? You know, so, you know, you gotta have a good water source. I was teasing earlier because my neighbor has a hot tub And for some reason, my bees love her hot tub. And she goes, "You gotta keep your bees out of here." I said, "I told them, they don't listen." So I said, "They're coming over to relax, I guess, you know, so I try to put a water source out for my bees and stuff like that. And so that's another thing you gotta look at when you're trying to put a hive together is, are my bees gonna have a good water source? Cause they will drink up to a quart of water. Yes,
Going back just a bit, I assume you've not had a problem with the top blowing off in a very strong wind of your hive.
oh yeah,
You have had.
yeah. We don't have gentle breezes in Northwest Ohio.
No, we don't.
So most of my hives have a couple bricks on top of them to secure them down even more. And then you have vandals. In my backyard, my hives are, we're looking out there and I'm like, I had to wait, my eyes weren't open yet. I said, is that hive knocked over? Somebody came into our yard over the winter and pushed over one of my hives. And so we had to go out there and fix it up in our yard in the middle of the winter. And I'm like, people, and then I've had a couple hives stolen over the years.
Wow.
So you get vandals and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of stuff that happens to your bees and hives and stuff like that. So, you know, a lot of things happen. Yes.
But my son is in Canada, and he had some hives, and a bear got him, and he had electric fence around. Unfortunately, the bear didn't bother them a bit. They'll have an electric fence.
Yep, bears, but it probably went in a pool. So they will get into them, yes.
I like to feed the hummingbirds, but the bees, assorted, I imagine, are swarming around. Is there any way I can feed the hummingbirds but not draw all the, nothing I can do?
No,
First come, first serve.
well, the advantage you have maybe right now is everything's starting to bloom. The bees will go towards that natural nectar more than they will the sugar water. So eventually they'll stop, I think.
Okay.
But
But the
you can
hummingbird.
also get lazy bees where they're like, there's a free meal over here and they're gonna go there and eat. So, okay, I got 9 minutes to get through my presentation.
You use the term mead as a byproduct. I don't know what that word means.
Mead is alcoholic beverage. It's like beer.
14% alcohol.
Really?
Yeah. Joe. Who said it's good? Joe, you need to talk to him after the class.
Right.
It was the first alcoholic beverage invented.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So you learned something, Joe.
Thank you.
Okay, we're on slide 1. See how fast I can talk. Go ahead.
You
quick.
got till 12:45, so you're good.
It's not working. It fell asleep, I think. There we go. I'll move so you don't see. Oh, she already went by it. Go ahead. That's my nephew. Can you see all the bees?
Yes.
Yes.
We were catching a swarm that day and it didn't bother him at all. So
How did you catch it?
very carefully. Go ahead. I'm not gonna explain that word. Okay. The American honeybee with a question mark. Are you leaving?
Yeah, I've seen this before. Remember?
Yeah.
I've seen all your slides. It's very interesting, so everybody stay for us.
She's leaving. Okay. American honeybee with a question mark. Is there such a thing?
Now there are 500 kinds.
No, bees, but honeybee. Is there American honeybee? No. Okay, go ahead. Brought to the American around 1620. Go ahead. They were called the white man's fly by the natives. So they were brought over from Europe. Go ahead.
I'm trying.
And of course,
There is no.
the Africanized bees flew over the wall from South America. Okay, we already talked about that. Go ahead. Pop quiz. Okay, these are all questions about honeybees. What does 6 weeks mean when you're talking about a honeybee?
That's its lifetime.
That's its lifetime. A honeybee only lives for 6 weeks and then it dies. So that's why you gotta make sure you have a good queen and you're checking to make sure she's laying eggs. A good queen can lay up to 2,000 eggs a day. So of course, she's trying to keep that hive alive by reproducing more. We talked about hibernation, no stingers. Who has stingers? You know you have 3 castes in bees. You have the queen, the worker, and the drones. Do all of them have stingers?
No.
Who doesn't have a stinger?
Drone.
The drones, correct. That's the male bee. A male bee is called a drone. They do not have stingers. So sometimes you'll have, the circus act where the beekeeper will come and he'll be like, oh, got a bee in my eye, we'll pull it out. It's because it's a male bee, the drone. He puts it in there, trying to impress the 4th graders.
Have you done that?
No. Because I'm like, I picked the wrong one. We talked about drone. It's a male bee. Purpose of bee in regards cast, I already said that. Fall eviction. Chris liked this one last time. No, I think it was Barb liked it. In the fall, of course, the hive is trying to reduce to be able to have stores for over the winter. So in the fall, you'll see a bunch of dead bees out in front of your hive. They've kicked out all the male bees. Because of course, we know us male bees, all we do is watch ESPN and drink honey or meat. So they get kicked out in the fall. All the male bees are evicted because really they don't have a purpose. Because really the only purpose of the drone male bee is for reproduction. So they get kicked out in the fall. Honey, we already talked about. Next slide. We talked about a little bit about different bees. There's just 4 types of bees. Of course, most beekeepers will keep the Italian bees. It's a gentler bee, easier to work with. The Russians are good, a little bit. They're more aggressive. I need water. But they're a little bit more adapt to colder weather. So they'll survive a little bit better up here in Ohio and stuff. It's like we talked about the 3 different castes. You can see the different sizes. Of course, your queen, you can see her over there in the big picture on the right there too. Her abdomen there is very much longer because she drops her butt down into the comb to lay the egg. So it needs to be longer, but she's also sensitive there, like I said earlier, depending on the size of the comb, each of the little holes, she can tell by the size which egg to put in there, either a fertilized female worker egg, or if it's a bigger comb size, she'll put a drone egg in her, non-fertilized egg.
Wow.
And so she can determine that just by, and you can tell the drones, this picture is a little bit easier, by their eyeballs. See how their eyeballs are real close together? That's how you can easily tell the size, and their eyeballs are close together. That's how you can tell it's a drone bee, male bee. Okay, next slide. That is called a bee fruit. It's a low-hanging fruit of bees. It grows in southeast Ohio. You can go down there and pick them, and that's how you get bees. It's a joke. Just seeing who's still awake. No, it actually was a swarm of bees though on this guy's tree. And so that was an easy one to catch. I just went in there and I said, hey, can I cut the branch off? He goes, sure, so I cut the branch off, dropped the bees in a box and left. And we had me a swarm of bees. So next slide. Okay. Benefits of beekeeping, of course, we know 80 to 90% of the crops we eat are pollinated by honeybees. So honeybees don't populate everything. They do a majority of them. And then other bees will pollinate also, like honeybees don't pollinate tomatoes. Actually, tomatoes are self-pollinating. You can pollinate them yourself just by flicking your finger at them. But honeybees give us a variety of products. Of course, we all know honey and we all know beeswax. Those are the two most popular things.
How do you collect beeswax?
Mind your own. Beeswax is, when you're harvesting your honey, it comes in the comb. The comb is made of beeswax.
Okay.
To harvest the honey, you gotta cut off the cappings. And so when you're screening your honey, you gather up all those cappings, and basically that's your beeswax
Okay.
and stuff like that. So, and then you can, when you're cleaning and scraping off your hives and stuff like that, you gather up a bunch of beeswax and then you melt it down and stuff, pollen is in, do we have any health food people in here that go to the health food stores?
I've got pollen at home.
You get pollen. Most time you can get it at some farmers markets, but if you go to a health food store, you'll find pollen there. You'll also find royal jelly. Royal jelly is the only thing the queen eats. It's produced by the bees for the queen. She can live up to 5 years. And so they're studying the health benefits of royal jelly as far as maybe helping with longevity and stuff like that. So it doesn't taste very good, but. And propolis, we talked about that already. That's the bees glue and compound and stuff like that. Apitherapy is what they're doing there to the right. There's actually where you can go in and get treatments where you get actually stung for health benefits by bees for apitherapy and stuff like that. And of course, the enjoyment. That was one of my tables I set up. I was doing a farmer's market there at BGSU for the students. Okay, next slide. This is a little picture. I thought it was kind of really amazing. You can see the comb over there next to it. And then these are all pollen that the bees have collected, or bees can collect from all the different plants. The one that interested me was this one right here. You can see it, it's kind of like an orangish, and it's a dandelion. I thought, why isn't it yellowish? You know, and it's amazing that the pollen doesn't necessarily line up with the flower itself, but it's kind of, and here's asparagus. I don't care about it, it is asparagus.
Is that snowdrop? Is that the flower? It's a little white flower.
Where's
The
the-
red, clear over to this side,
Yeah,
second one down.
yep.
Huh.
Yeah, there's plum and wild cherry, pear and crab apple. My crab apples are all red, but
Yeah.
there's the pollen from it is blue.
Huh.
So, or blue, orange, yellow. Oh, yeah, I'm colorblind. Okay, how we do? Go ahead. This is an apiary I set up, 6 hives there. Go ahead, next one. I'll show you the inside. This is what a hive, you know, where you're talking about how big is a hive and how much do you need. Well, you saw the hives, how much room you really need. And this is kind of how a hive is set up. So you got a hive stand to support the hive, and then you have a bottom board. That kind of closes off the bottom from all the weather or anything getting in the bottom. The deep super here is normally what you use as your brood chamber. So that's where the queen's gonna be laying the eggs and stuff like that. Then you have what they call a queen excluder. That's to keep her from going up into your honey supers, because you don't want her getting up in there and laying brood in your honey. So you keep her separated by putting it on a queen excluder. She's the bigger bee, she can't fit through it, so it's sized just right, so she can't fit through there. And so then when you go to harvest your honey, you can pull the box off and don't have to worry about any brood being up in there. And then you have an inner cover, and then there's your outer cover. And that normally fits over, can you go back? See how it fits over top of the box? You were asking earlier about weather and stuff, and I put extra bricks on there to kind of keep it down. Go ahead forward. And so it's got like a metal tin or something, I don't know what it is, some kind of aluminum or something, over the top of it to help protect from the elements. Okay, next slide. Someone earlier was asking the difference about how can I tell the difference between honeybees, wasps, and hornets, yellow jackets? If you look at this, the quickest way I could tell, because I get calls all the time about, hey, I got honeybees. And I say, can you send me a picture? And usually I can tell right away by the shine. Can you see?
Yeah.
The honeybees are fuzzy because they collect pollen all over themselves. They carry it on their back legs. You can actually see on that honeybee on top, see that yellowish on that hind leg?
Yeah.
That's actually pollen that they have gathered. And what they'll do is they'll get all over their body and then they'll groom themselves and put it in that pollen pouch, and then bring it back to the hive. But you can see the other ones, they're all shiny and not fuzzy. And that's how you can tell real quick if you have honeybees or anything else. Also, unlike me, they have a thin waist. You know? So that's how you can tell right away also, is they're thin waist-like. You can tell real quick that they're not a honeybee. Go ahead. Oh, questions? Whew. Okay, next slide. I got a couple more. Go ahead. Just click it until it's almost done. There we go. Pollination. The interesting thing about pollination. Bees were created that they only pollinate when they go on a flight the same plants. So they would not be any good if they pollinated from a apple to a pear to a pineapple to a cucumber. So the way they were created is the bee will go out, and if it's pollinated, it will go from apple to apple to apple to apple, or from pear to pear to pear, or peach to peach to peach, or cherry to cherry to cherry. Because that's the way the pollination works. It has to gather pollen grains here and take it to this flower. That's how plants get pollinated. So it has to be the same flower or bloom, or your plants won't get pollinated. So
Amazing.
yeah. And learn this with apple trees, you need different apple trees to pollinate your apple trees. So if you have all of the same apple tree, you're probably not getting good fruit because you need a different apple to pollinate those other apple trees. I learned this when we ordered our apple trees. So next slide. Go ahead, click, 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 click. Couple more clicks. One more, there we go. So remember we talked about all the bees and stuff? In Ohio, we have 500 bee species alone. Those aren't honeybees, those are bees. So you have all kinds of different bees. 20,000 species in the world, 4,000 in North America. One more click. So other than bees, you have also a whole nother group of pollinators. So we can say, how come, or before the honeybees were brought to America, how did anything get pollinated? Well, you have a bunch of different other things that pollinate. Even though they don't produce honey, you have all those other bees that are pollinating. Plus you have butterflies, wasps, moths, beetles, flies, birds. Well, that's a nice hummingbird. And they should be here next week.
Yeah.
Bats, wind. even some plants get pollinated by water. So, a lot of different pollinators, aside from just honeybees. So remember, it said that slide said 80 to 90% of the crops we eat. But there's other things that need pollinated besides just what we eat. So a group of different pollinators. When they say about, we gotta be careful about losing the honeybee, because if we lose the honeybee, whatever is affecting the honeybee is gonna affect all of these. Because really, they're kind of like all in the same thing, same boat, really. Or if you're a Noah kind of guy in the same ark. So, next slide. I'm done. All right. Any more questions? Did I generate any more questions?
Well, I saw that you said, me, I could pollinate, so that's like if I walk through my flowers and I'm just moving pollen from one to another.
Yeah,